I know you're not telling me that after planning this little trip and spending your coin, you would actually make my toes curl and not expect to get some of this young, tight, wet cat in return. Or at least to get your knob slobbed. This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Genesis, Part 17. When we left off, True was in a conundrum in Denver. Bosch had told her that she had to poop or get off the pot. And whatever she decided, she was going to have to say it with her chest and mean it. And in Texas, Mrs. Ali was home alone. Both Wise and Salima had ran out of that house like bats out of hell. And she didn't know if she'd see either one of them again alive. She didn't even know what was going on. What she did know with absolute certainty was that her daughter-in-law truly did love her son. And while she didn't make it a habit of discussing her son and his wife's business, she knew that there was one person who she could thank for the closeness that she'd been able to develop with Salima. And she could also trust that person with her concerns. Mom Brenda. Mom Brenda had been mothering Salima. Salima had been behaving like she was one fry short of a Happy Meal and driving everybody crazy. So Angela had stepped in and referred her to Mom Brenda. And Mom Brenda was up for the challenge. She'd been praying for, praying with, talking to, and listening to Salima. Their daily talks had been doing wonders for Salima. And with all that was going on, Mrs. Ali needed backup. She needed somebody who could speak to her fears, tell her what to do, if anything, and reassure her if possible. So she called Mom Brenda. When Mom Brenda answered, she said, "Please tell me that nobody is dead, in labor, or missing. Because otherwise, what reason do you have to call me at this ungodly hour?" Mom Brenda had a strict rule. She didn't make or receive calls after 10 p.m. And it was darn near midnight. Mrs. Ali said, "Brenda, I am sorry to be calling you so late." Wise left the house because he was concerned about one of his partners. And not 30 minutes later, Salima got a phone call that had her in a tizzy, and she ran out of here behind him, dressed like G.I. Jane and provided no explanation. Mom Brenda asked, "And she didn't say anything?" Mrs. Ali said, "She said she wasn't going to live in this world without her husband." Mom Brenda said, "Well, that'll do it. If I know anything about Salima, I know she don't play about the people she loves. But she also didn't get to where she is in life without having done some things that I can go the rest of my life not knowing about. I'd rather see her as the sweet girl that she can be most of the time. But you better bet your bottom dollar, even if it seems like she ran out of there on a tear with no rhyme or reason, she got a plan, and not a man or a mountain will keep her from executing it. Whatever's going on, she needs our prayers. That's what you caught me doing when you called. Otherwise, I'd have been knocked out. I knew God had kept me up for something. I just didn't know who. So I was already praying. Want to join me?" And then Mrs. Ali joined Mom Brenda in prayer. Mrs. Ali had no idea what she'd gotten herself into. Mom Brenda had been known to tarry before the Lord for hours until she felt something break in the heavens, as she called it. And as a lifelong devout Muslim, Mrs. Ali had no experience with that kind of praying. At the same time, Q was at Samuel and Miss Charlotte's house. He was actually in the guest house in Big Wood's bedroom. Miss Charlotte had called him and woke him up out of a dead sleep. Big Wood hadn't been sleeping well. So Miss Charlotte had taken to sleeping in the guest house too. That way she could hear if he needed anything throughout the night. On this particular night, Big Wood had decided that he would get out of the bed. He'd transfer himself to his wheelchair. This was something that he'd been working on in physical therapy, but hadn't yet mastered. Why he thought that it was a good idea to attempt this alone at almost midnight was precisely what Q wanted to know. Because it was a whole lot easier to help Big Wood transfer himself from the bed to the chair than it was to get the big man up off the floor. So after getting him up off the floor, after his failed self-transfer, Q asked just that. When did? He said, "Bro, what the hell was you thinking?" Using the tablet, Big Wood said, "I'm tired of needing help." Q said, "So you figured you'd break your neck and guarantee that you'd need help for the rest of your life?" And Big Wood didn't respond. So Q said, "You're not going to get back to True like this. What you call pushing yourself is really just punishing yourself. You got a rigorous treatment plan, a plan that I had to fight with the therapist to follow through with. That's gotta be enough for you, bro. You can't do stuff like this. You almost gave your mother a heart attack. If she wasn't such a light sleeper, she would have never known you was even in the floor. Cause you ain't even say nothing. And I get that you're still having difficulty speaking. But nigga, you could yell. How long was you planning on laying there?" Clearly frustrated with a bruised ego, Big Wood used the tablet to say, "Until I could get up myself." When Q had arrived, Big Wood was rolling around in the floor trying to get up himself. And Q had tried everything to help Wood do just that. When that failed, he and Miss Charlotte tried to get him up. But Miss Charlotte was not strong enough to provide any real assistance with getting the big man up off the floor. Q finally had to use some of the straps that the physical therapist used during Big Wood's therapy sessions, the ones that she or he would leave behind. Big Wood was more than capable of assisting with getting himself up from a seated position, but assisting with getting himself up off the floor was a whole nother story. That was a battle of epic proportions, and it was clear that the whole situation had left him frustrated, embarrassed, and discouraged. Using the tablet, he said, "I'm tired of this tablet. I'm tired of needing help to do everything. My son will be here in less than 8 weeks, and I don't want to miss seeing True with a pregnant belly, my baby being born, his circumcision, or his naming ceremony." While Big Wood had long since converted from Islam to Christianity, his family had held on to the tradition of naming ceremonies when new babies came into the world. And if he couldn't be there, Miss Charlotte would. The rest of the family planned to watch it via video, and he did not want to join them. Big Wood continued listing all of the things that he didn't want to miss, signing the birth certificate, the sleepless nights, all of it. And when he was done with his list, he said, "And I could tell something's up and you're not telling me." And Q just shook his head. Instead of answering audibly, he signed, "Have you tried ASL?" And he watched Big Wood as Big Wood watched him. And then he saw the recognition go across Big Wood's face. He'd understood Big Wood signing. And when Big Wood signed in response, "I hadn't tried until now," they were both shocked and excited. Q was fluent in ASL because his sister Anya was deaf. And Big Wood was fluent in ASL because Q's sister Anya was deaf. While Q and Anya no longer lived together, Q's daughter Isla was also born deaf. So he signed while he talked on a regular basis. And as one of the godfathers to all of Q and Angela's children, Big Wood signed on a regular basis before he had gotten shot and died. It appeared that the aphasia literally was only affecting his ability to speak verbally. And the fact that 3 of the 4 people Big Wood interacted with on a daily basis all knew ASL meant Big Wood's reliance on the tablet would be dramatically decreased. Q signed while saying, "Well, that solves one of your problems. You know that I can relate to how you feel right now. I was away from Angela and the kids for 3 months when they were hiding in Puerto Rico, remember? I wasn't injured, but I didn't have a clue where they were, if they were okay, or when or if we would ever be reunited. You helped me get back to them, and I'm going to help you get back to True. But you can't do stupid stuff like you did tonight." Big Wood signed, "I hear you, but I don't hear you telling me whatever it is that you hiding." Q said, "It'll keep till morning. I need to talk to you and your mother at the same time." Q had yet to tell them that Big Dro was dead. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, Star, codenamed Eve, had been a very busy woman while Taryn was handling his business. He was downloading pictures of all of the security who'd been in and out of her room and Terrence, and uploading those photos to the Baptiste server so that the tech team could run the images through facial recognition software. Since Lewis, her contact with the Haitians, was the one responsible for monitoring what that bug Penn was picking up, she was busy replaying all the audio that was captured in Taryn's room. While his meetings weren't held in that room, he had convened his right hand and the heads of his organization in that room so that he could update them on his plans. And Eve didn't just have audio of that conversation, but she had video, which meant she had the images of all of the leaders in the Cato organization, which she promptly uploaded to the Baptiste server and sent over to Lewis. She listened as Taryn wrapped up his meeting with his team and laughed as she heard him discuss his plans for the rest of his night. Taryn said, in his very thick Jamaican accent, "If all goes well, we'll have a new plug, new allies, and protection. And you'll all be rewarded. To see that reward, though, you and your teams are going to have to do a good job. Hopefully, I've done a good job today, too. And I should know for sure in a matter of hours. If all goes well in Texas, I'll be here, rewarding myself with that young tender I got down the hall. I'm pretty confident that she was sufficiently impressed by the day we had today. So once I get a few drinks in her, it shouldn't be that difficult to get her out of her panties." Star just shook her head and laughed. He was going to get her out of her panties, but he wasn't going to get to have what she had inside them. She was saving that for another day, and he was definitely going to get it. But that day, he wouldn't live to tell about it. No matter how things turned out in Texas that night, Star had the green light, and she was going to play this all the way to the end. Taryn was going to wish he never, ever met Eve. Meanwhile, in Denver, True had done everything she could to convince herself that no was the right answer. She wished she could call Pastor Tanya, but her and her husband Stephen had taken an emergency sabbatical, taking their children to parts unknown, and True didn't have any way to contact her. Part of her wished she could at least call Stephanie or Rennie, but deep down inside, she already knew what they would say. Them two heifers would tell her to go for what she knew. Well, maybe not Stephanie, because she had changed. Hell, she'd settled for Angela at a time like this. But it was entirely too late to be calling Angela. And she kind of already knew what she would say. She'd tell her the same thing Pastor Tanya would, that she was no longer the woman she was before she met Big Wood. And while it was still in her, she ain't need to go there. But the real truth was that she was still the woman that she was before she met Big Wood. She just put that woman on a shelf. What had made her a good finisher was her ability to separate the real from the fake, to act without emotion and get what she wanted out of a man without getting her feelings involved. She was having a hard time deciding, not because she was worried about falling for Bosch. She was worried about Bosch falling for her. She did not need a repeat of Daniel, the one man she'd gotten involved with on a pretty consistent basis after Bo died. They'd met in college, but he had a long-term girlfriend, a girlfriend that he later married and divorced. And when he took a job in True's backyard, he looked her up. They started what she felt was only a fling, and he'd hoped would grow into a serious relationship. He was looking for a trophy wife, and she was content with a situationship. When he attempted to take things too far, True decided that it was in her best interest to keep her escapades to jump-offs, because these niggas was tripping. They wanted promotions, and she wasn't hiring until she met Big Wood. And even he was a hard sell. So if Bosch had designs on going from security to lover to significant other, he was going to be sorely disappointed. And she was going to overly complicate her life and her job. And she ain't need them kind of complications. And that thought was enough. She turned the water off in the shower, hung the shower head back up, because it had served its purpose. And so had her thoughts. She was going to bed. And she let Bosch know in the morning that her answer was a resounding no. Meanwhile, in Jersey, Eve and Taryn were enjoying drinks at the hotel's bar. Eve was laughing at all of Taryn's elderly jokes, and Taryn thought he'd picked himself a winner. Eve was all over Taryn, thanking him for a wonderful local getaway, sharing his time with her and spending his change. So when Star said, "I wish this date wasn't ending already," Taryn said, "It don't have to. Your room or mine." Eve said, "Now, the thing about it is, I'm not ready to go all the way, and I also don't want to feel like I'm selling it. And I don't want you to feel like I'm for sale. I appreciate you showing me a good time, and I definitely love how you bought out the mall. I don't even know how I'm going to get all that stuff back to school. But in almost every store, I asked you if you were sure, and you ain't hesitate to pull out that bankroll. I didn't ask you for nothing. You offered it, and you agreed that I wouldn't owe you anything. But it's important for you to know that I find you attractive. Them lips are absolutely kissable. And I have to imagine that you probably know how to do some amazing things with them. And if I could be honest, the whole time we've been sitting at this bar, I've been imagining all the places that you could put them lips." Then Taryn told Eve all the places he wanted to put them lips and all the things he wanted to do with them. And Eve said, "Please don't threaten me with a good time, because I'm not ready to go all the way, but baby, I ain't never turned down a good meal, and I ain't never denied nobody from getting one. It's like water and it tastes like peaches. But I don't mean no harm, but I highly doubt that a man like you, of your caliber and of your age, is willing to do all of that and not get nothing in return. So I say we call it a night, and you go back to your room and I go back to mine." Taryn said, "Are you asking me what I'm willing to do, or have you already decided for me?" Star said, "I know you're not telling me that after planning this little trip and spending your coin, you would actually make my toes curl and not expect to get some of this young, tight, wet cat in return. Or at least to get your knob slobbed." Taryn said, "There's nothing remotely sexy or romantic about that description. But to be clear, I have no problem pleasing a woman. I enjoy nothing more than being the reason why a woman feels good. And I happen to believe that if I do it right, you'll come back for more. And eventually you'll want more than mouth play." Eve said, "You wouldn't believe the number of men I've met who've talked a good game and then they let me down. They agree to make it all about me, but in the end, it's just a game. They do everything they can think of to get me all hot and bothered, thinking they're going to change my mind, thinking that if they can get me worked up enough, I'm going to be begging for the D. One time, a dude got pissed off when I didn't change my mind. He got up, walked out, and left me hanging. I had to finish myself after he left." And Taryn just bust out laughing. He said, "Let me guess, they was 20-something like you." Eve said, "Yeah, 20s, 30s. Taryn said, "I'm not a young whippersnapper. Them niggas still wet behind the ears. All they know is chasing their own pleasure. They've yet to learn to study the true art of pleasuring a woman. But I ain't get to be this big age half-stepping. I've studied it long and hard. I've also learned to be a patient man. And I know what it means to work for what I want. and I ain't never not gotten what I wanted. I ain't never had to take it. And if you ain't giving it, I can find somebody else who will. So I'm not pressed, but you let me get my hands and my lips on it, and I guarantee you'll be. As Terrence said all of that, he was sliding Eve's bar stool closer to him. He swung his left leg on the outside of the bar stool, slid one of her exposed legs over his lap, and slid his right hand up under her bodycon dress. When he reached her middle, he discovered that Eve didn't have no panties on. And when he got his hand to her yoni, he discovered that she was like Little Caesar's, hot and ready. He stroked her middle while whispering in her ear, "Let me take you back to your room and show you all the ways I can make your head spin. Let me show you why they call me Taryn the Punisher, other than what I do to niggas when they cross me. I promise you, them YNs ain't got nothing on an OG." And as he whispered, he stroked. As he stroked, Eve got wetter and wetter. And just as she felt her yoni start to pulse, Taryn eased his hand from under her skirt, sniffed his finger, and then licked it. Waved the bartender over with the same hand. And when the bartender arrived, he said, "Check, please." Meanwhile, in Denver, Bosch had both his arms under True's thighs. His hands were cupping her tatas, and his thumbs were stroking her ipples. At the same time, he had his face in the place, and he was alternating between using his lips like a vacuum and fluttering his tongue like the wings of a butterfly. The combination of sensations was sending True over the edge. He was driving her completely crazy, and she was trying to stop him. If he didn't get out of that position, more than his lips was going to be wet, because it had been entirely too long, and True was a sprayer. She was right on the verge of explosion, and just when she couldn't take anymore, he pulled away and said, "I told you, it's all or nothing." And then True woke up, and she was mad as hell. Not only was she frustrated that she'd made up her mind to tell Bosch it was a no in the morning, yet her subconscious just concocted a dream that made it painfully clear that her no would be given under duress. Not to mention that she was even hornier now. Her entire body was tingling. Her yoni was thumping. Her pajama bottoms were soaked, and she had no interest in reacquainting herself with her darn shower head. And to make matters worse, she was hungry. When she looked over at the clock, she realized it was 2 o'clock in the morning. She got out of the bed, took off her soaking wet pajama bottoms, threw on a robe, and headed to the kitchen. Once in the kitchen, she grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of peanut butter crackers. Then she sat down at the kitchen table, drank her water, and ate the crackers. When she was done, she stood up, turned around, and there was Bosch. He said, "Having a hard time sleeping too, huh?" True said, "I had a dream and it woke me up, and then I was hungry. What about you?" Bosch said, "I'm a light sleeper. I heard something in here and I thought I should come investigate it. You good?" True said, "No, but I will be." Bosch said, "All right, sleep tight." Then Bosch turned around and started walking to his room. Before he could get halfway down the hall, True said, "Bosch." He turned back around, came back to the kitchen and said, "Sup?" True said, "If we do this, you can't fall in love. I ain't got no love to give. I will never be your girl. You've earned a promotion. When this is over, you'll be a general. That means you'll be reporting to me. Falling in love with me would be dangerous for you. Not only would you get your feelings hurt, but it would potentially cloud your judgment. I get that you make it a habit of pooping where you eat, but I don't. I'm a woman. I do not have the same luxuries that men do. My reputation, my name, can't be tarnished by my sexual involvement with anybody that I outrank. My business can't be in the streets. This place is covered in security. And while they remain professional in my presence, I'm sure they're gonna talk. If they see or hear anything that even suggests," Bosch said, "You think I gotta tell tales on my D? I don't need bragging rights. I'm not looking for a come up, and ain't nobody gonna respect me sleeping with the boss. Most people wouldn't understand or even comprehend that two things can be true at the same time. I'm loyal to the commitment I made to your man because of what he did for me and mine when I was down, but that don't endear me to him or make you off limits to me. For most men, it would, and those men would side-eye me if it ever got out that you and I had anything going on. I know they call you the truth. You used to putting it on niggas, but the same way you worried about me falling in love, I gotta caution you not to fall in love." True chuckled, because that was not a concern of hers, but she could understand how a man would think so highly of his D game that he'd be concerned. Truth be told, True had heard about the women in the life who'd made the mistake of falling for brutal Bosch, only to be left with a bag full of them feelings while being shown the exit out of Bosch's life. It was one of the reasons why nobody knew where that man resided, and it was also a reason why he didn't have a whole lot of friends in the life, because he'd ruined quite a few women's chances for any future relationships with other individuals who were in the life. The average woman didn't understand the concept of you finish the way you start. So they allow themselves to start off as jump-offs and side chicks with the hopes that they'll be able to endear themselves by screwing their way, cooking their way, and sweet-talking their way into a permanent position in a man's life, with no respect for the fact that while on occasion men do promote jump-offs, and they do leave main chicks and elevate side chicks, divorce wives and marry mistresses, those are exceptions, not the rule. It was clear that Bosch didn't understand that True wasn't one of them. And similarly, Bosch understood how a man could fall into True's web, but his head was on straight. His mind was clear, but he had blinders. He wasn't consciously aware of the similarities between a pregnant True and his deceased girlfriend. He wasn't able to identify the emotions that were driving the connection that he felt between himself and True. He thought it was all sexual tension. And while True wasn't psychoanalyzing Bosch, there was something in her that told her falling in love was a huge risk for Bosch, whether that was her past experiences, being overly cautious, or something else that she couldn't name. She was determined to be on the lookout for any signs that this was all going in the wrong direction. And the minute she saw any, she was going to shut the whole thing down. So she said, "You focus on keeping a rein on your heart, and I'll focus on keeping a rein on mine." Bosch said, "Bet." Then he slowly walked over to True, pulled the belt on her robe until it untied, looked down at her, rubbed one hand down her belly, the other down her hip, and then stroked her middle. Looked her in her eyes and said, "When I first got to Denver, you told me if I saw anything in the kitchen that I wanted to eat, I could eat it. It's a good thing you were already in the kitchen."